You are getting ready to listen to the voice of Dr. Rhadi Ferguson, 2004 Olympian, four-time national judo champion, Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, author, speaker, and coach.
You didn't want to record that?
No, I mean, you can ask me about my personal life, Doc. It's, I can always edit it if I don't like it.
No, seriously, I was wondering how business was going.
Business is going great.
That's good.
Dojo's going well. I did put a couple games in that you recommended because I was like the no games guy. But it's kids having a little more fun in practice. I'm not gonna lie, which is good.
But I mean, things like tug of war, that builds up those exact muscles you need for gripping. I mean, it's fun.
Tug of war is great, and the belt pickup game is perfect. Mm-hmm. It's a great level change game.
Right. And it's the same thing, too. Like if you're running for that belt, you've got to sprint, which in judo, you have a lot of bursts of speed. You have to pull. So, yeah, I mean, all of those games that I do address specific skills and muscles that are used in judo.
So that's been going good. I appreciate you for that. I told you that. You convinced me. But I don't make the bulk of my money from. I was telling my students that last night. But I had one kid who came in and he says, "I just want to come in because I want." He said, "I want to take a little break." I said, "Take a break from what?" I said, "You haven't been here. You want wrestling season? You haven't been here." I said, "Well," I said, "Don't worry." I said, "I'll terminate your membership immediately." I said, "And I'll redo the contract with your mom for your other two brothers." And I said, "If you'd like to come back, then we can review the stipulations of what you want to do when you come back in the dojo and my expectations of you." He was like, "Well, I didn't mean it like that." I said, "It's okay." I said, "I want you to say the same thing, but I want you to use Lisa." I said, "Just say, Lisa, I'm not breaking up with you. I just need a break from you right now." So exactly. I said, "So what, how does Lisa feel right now?" He says, "Man, she feels bad." Exactly. And she's going to probably ask you what? He said, like, why I want to break. I said, so tell Lisa why you want to break. He said, "Well, I'm just not passionate about it anymore." I said, once again, not exactly what you want to tell Lisa. I said, but I said, you're a young man. He's 15, 16. I said, you are at the age now. I said, you're past the stages of beating and yelling and screaming and all those things. I said, you're at the point now where when you say something or you make a decision, I said, what you say needs to be honored and needs to be respected. I said, and you need to be accountable for that, what you say. I said, if you're going to take a break, I said, you got to remember. I said, some people go to places thinking that it's a right, and other people open their place because they believe it's a privilege. I said, I think it's a privilege for you to be able to train here. I don't think it's a right for you to be able to train. So what we'll do is I will honor what you said and that you need a break. So then I get a text from the mom later that he's crying. And the mom said, you told him that you wanted to take a break. She said, that's what you said. I didn't understand it, but that's how business is going. Never a dull moment at Tampa, Florida Judo. But as we do not make the bulk of our money from judo.
Yes, I would be surprised if you did.
Now, I make the bulk of my money in the judo marketplace, but I don't make the bulk of my money from judo. I make my money from coaching. Coaching and consulting. I do what you do, but just a different widget. You know what I mean? Just a different deliverable.
That's kind of similar with us. And I don't know, remember if I told you this the other day, but we are kind of typical in companies that make educational games. So people would think that we make educational games. We've got 20 of them on the market, that's where all our money comes from. But in fact, most of our money comes from contracts where someone comes in and says, hey, I have an idea for a game. How about you make it for me?
Correct. So I tell people all the time, I say, people don't, I don't know if you have an office or anything like that. But
yeah, we have one in Minneapolis. I mean, I work at home, but we have an office in Minneapolis.
Exactly. So people don't pay me for my facilities. They pay me for my faculties. That's what they pay me for. They pay me for the real estate in between my ears. And I built up the real estate in between my ears to such a fashion that the square footage in between my ears has a maximum amount of value. So that when somebody says, I would like to, quote unquote, get some advice for you or pick your brain, if you're picking out of that real estate, you're picking out of that real estate at X amount per hour. And that's what people come to me for. People don't come to me for, because I do not have the greatest Uchimata in the world. I do not, nor do I need to. I don't have the greatest armbar, the greatest, I don't have any of that. But what I do understand systems. I understand systems engineering. I understand the systems-based approach. I understand how to look at a given, make some assumptions, and then come up with a solution. And if that solution isn't right, feedback loop back to the top till we figure the thing out. It's an iterative process. It's the same as programming.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same.
And programming is a very iterative process, and people that don't realize that it's not that I sit down in a weekend and I make something amazing, and I hear people say, "Oh yeah, you make games. My 13-year-old nephew made an app," and I'm pretty sure what your 13-year-old nephew made is not along the lines of what I make. You know, for one thing, there's we made an app and it looks great on iPad, but on a phone, all the buttons are off the screen. So now we got to fix that. Or it is teaching kids about Mayan history. And initially when we did it, we forgot that, yes, number lines have a 0, but timelines don't. And now we got to go back and fix that. And everything has to be fit with the educational aspect. And it also has to work on all different phones. And some people want it to work offline. And there's, like you said, all of those new factors that come into play.
Right. And people don't understand that phones have apps, but websites also have apps. Right. There's a website app. Yeah. And then your thing needs to work on Google, Chrome, and Safari, and Firefox.
That is my life.
People don't get it, man. It's a lot that has you have an Android interface, you have an iOS interface. It's a lot to it.
And then I have people ask me, well, you made these games. Why are you still working on them? Well, because Google decides that autoplay is no longer going to be allowed. So anything that uses autoplay will no longer work as designed on Google Chrome. So I got to go back and re-engineer that. And yeah, things change in the market.
All the time. And it is an iterative process. I was just, my friend from Grambling University is here on a personal development weekend. He has some business in Tampa, but he was teaching this morning. And before he had to get online and teach, he just talked about and you teach too, Doc, the amount of reps, the iterative process of becoming good at chemistry. It's the same as judo and the same as football and the same as soccer. It's all the same, but nobody really wants to go through that iterative process. They don't want to do it. And people don't understand that in an app-driven society, apps are made different than board games were made when we were playing. Mm-hmm. Board games came with a set of directions. Mm-hmm. You open the board game, you had to read the what? The directions.
Sure, that's the first thing.
Apps are made in such a fashion that anybody can pick them up and begin to use it without any what? Directions. Right. They're made like that. People don't understand that there's I don't know I forget the term in computer science, computer engineering, but it's basically a body of work that creates games so that kids, adults can pick up a thing and begin playing it. Right.
Yes, UI, UX, user interface, user experience.
Thank you. I knew it was interface something, but I didn't want to trip over myself. Thank you. But and it came from the education space in the realm of the educative value of play, of how kids play. So they said when kids arrive to a kickball game, there's no rules for the kickball game. A 5-6-year-old kid runs up and he begins to what? He or she begins to what? So that is how an app is supposed to work. Yeah. And yeah, a lot of people don't get that.
That's how it's supposed to work. And like I said, we go through lots of iterations and we work a lot with young kids and, like people like your Rhadi, your little Rhadi, 6th, 7th graders, and we have them play our games. And if something isn't evident to them, we don't want a bunch of kids in the classroom raising their hand saying, Dr. Ferguson, we want it to be evident. And so when we watch those kids, if there's something they don't get, then we add an extra hint so that they're not asking the teacher.
The hard part, this was what and I'm glad that parents are listening to this because this is not what we wanted to talk about today, but people who develop educational apps have to do the following. The world is not an app, meaning that's not the way the world works. It doesn't work. It's not an app-based thing. What an educational app has to do is turn you into the developer in terms of how you think. Mm-hmm. So you have to use the app to increase your thinking so that you're no longer a person who's just looking to use an app. You become like the mind of the developer. And that's a hard thing for people to get and to understand, because all these children use apps and apps and apps, and adults use apps and apps and apps. And you use the apps and you're not thinking. Mm-hmm. This is the problem. This is why in human beings, the area that handles direction, the hippocampus, is almost, it's like quote unquote shrinking because it's not getting any use because we use Google Maps. When you and I were in school, Doc, you had to learn what typography or whatever it was. And yeah, I don't even know the word anymore. And you had to look at use the ruler and then look at the scale and find out how far stuff was, or pull out a street map and look at the name of the street and find it and then write it out and map it and use the marker, get the triptych from AAA. Yeah. Right.
Thomas Maps. Thomas
Maps, exactly. But nobody does that anymore. So now what happens is human beings do not have that human experience. So if they drop us somewhere and the phone battery goes out, mm-hmm. we're stuck because we are app-based. Yeah. Because nobody sees the importance. That is what math professors are trying to get students to learn when they say, stop using the calculator. They say, yeah, but I can use calculator to add. Yeah, but it's you're not doing the cognitive reps.
Well, the other reason is I can tell you that 7 times 8 is 56 faster than I can pick up my phone, unlock it, find the calculator, and type in 7 times 8. It actually saves you time if you can do it in your head.
It saves you time because you put in time.
Well, and then the other thing is you get an understanding, right? I did that work, I would say very immodestly. I was pretty good at it. And I did, as you said, many reps, and I had a feel for the mat. And when people talk about, Zen and all this kind of stuff and, the Star Wars, feel the force and all this kind of thing, I think a lot of it is just, I have been in that position 10,000 times. And so I know when I crank your head this way, most likely you're going to put that forearm out and I'm waiting for it. And it's the same thing. You get that feel for what's going to happen next, but it's the same thing with numbers. I was in a meeting once with a director from a state agency, and I was looking at these numbers and I said, that's statistically significant. And she said, how do you know that? And I mean, we worked it on the computer. It's because I have looked at so much data over the years that I can kind of compute a chi-square in my brain. And I can say that if you have, out of 120 people, you've got 10 times as many people in one category as another, that's going to be significant. So yeah, you get a feel for things, whether it's judo or chemistry or numbers. Or business. We're going to talk about business.
Yes, Michael Gladwell talks about that, about your blink. Your blink just gets good from the amount of reps that you've done. So we talked the other day about investing in your kids, and man, I wanted to talk about something totally different today, but we kind of jumped into business.
It's all right.
And I want to talk to you because you asked about my business. Well, I told you about my judo part of my business. I also have a Ferguson marketing point of my business where I do like marketing, and it runs on my podcast, my YouTube channel, my Twitter, my Instagram, 1, 2, 3, 4, my 4 Instagram accounts. And then I have assistants that work for me in Pakistan that do a lot of work. So the marketing side of my business and the health and wellness side is going great. Put some nice gravy on top of the rice. So business is going well for me with that. But I want to talk to you about, let's do a little bit of a deeper dive about given the name of your business, and I've heard this before, but I want you to explain it to the listeners now. Why did you name your business what you named it? And then let's dive in from there.
All right. Well, Seven Generation Games spun off from another company. So originally we were Spirit Lake Consulting. We were the largest private employer in the Spirit Lake Nation in North Central North Dakota. And I had two partners, Eric Longi and April St. Pierre. And both of them are enrolled members of the Spirit Lake tribe, well, which is Dakota, if you don't know. So anyway, April got offered a job running the casino. So she had to leave her, casinos are very strict on because ethics and problems. So she had to sell her share of the company to us. And so she left. And then Eric got cancer. Now he's been in remission for a long time, but he said, if I only have, a few years left, I want to spend it going to powwows and visiting with my grandchildren. So he sold his share of the company to me. And he said, you can't call it Spirit Lake Consulting because you're not, I can't sell you the name. It's not mine to sell. It's the Spirit Lake Nation. So we had to spin off, and he took all the professional development training contracts, and I took the software contracts. And we're trying to think of what is something that represents what we do. And Seven Generations is a concept that a lot of Indigenous nations have. That when you make a decision, you don't look at just how this is going to help your bottom line tomorrow, how it's going to help next quarter stock price. You look 7 generations forward.
Yes.
How is this going to impact my children and their children and their children? And at the same time, if you're trying to understand a person, you look 7 generations back. We were talking about your parents. We look at how they were raised and how their parents were raised and their parents' parents. And so you'll find this sometimes when you meet someone and they'll say, oh, Rhadi Ferguson, I don't know you. Who are your people? Who are your parents? And you tell them your parents and like, well, I don't know them. Who were their parents? It was the same thing when I went to Trinidad in December to visit my aunt, my cousins. And
okay, please tell people this. People do not know that. Just please give the people your cultural background, please.
Well,
it's interesting, and I listen. I post every Black History Month. I posted the picture of your grandfather.
That's cool. Yeah. So my grandparents came from some islands off the coast of Venezuela. So my grandfather was from Trinidad and Tobago, and as my grandmother put it, his people had come from Caracas, and her people came from Caracas, and so that's how they met. They got. Their parents set them up and they got on a boat and they came from Trinidad to New York City where my grandfather went to school. And
yes, ladies and gentlemen, she's part Trini.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, we've gone back a few times to visit family now, especially now that the border opened. And when my grandfather was in school, he applied to medical school and they said, we don't take Black people. I'm sure they didn't say it quite that nicely. And so he couldn't get into med school and he applied to Dalhousie University in Canada and got admitted there. And that's where he went to school. And they were always going to go back. And then, there was a depression and nobody could pay. And he got paid in potatoes and furniture from the carpenter. And then World War II broke out and there was no transport, for citizens. And then he passed away and they never ended up going back to Trinidad. But yes, my grandfather was one of the first Black physicians in North America. Sometimes people say he's the first one. He was not the first, but I mean, he must have finished med school in the 1920s. So 1920s or 30s. Anyway, a long time ago. And it was not a time when people of color were welcomed in medical school or Ivy League schools. So there's a lot of history about him. As you mentioned, there's that series Seeds of Change, I think it is. They show during Black History Month in Canada every year. And there's an episode on my grandparents called Before His Time. So yeah, check it out.
I've seen a picture of your grandfather before. He's definitely a cabrecito, light skinned Black dude. Your grandmother, same or more?
She was. Well, her name was Amelia Maria Castillo, so that kind of tells you a little bit about where her background was. Interestingly enough, one of my cousins, who obviously has more spare time than me, did a genealogy, and it showed that her grandfather on her on his on her birth certificate it shows he was. It says a Carib Indian, which is, I guess, how they referred to people back then.
Yes. Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, I definitely can see it. It's something. So do you like soca music? That's what we need to know.
I do.
Okay.
I mean, and the other thing I really like is the steel pan. I mean, when we were in Tobago and they had somebody at breakfast playing the steel pan every day, I thought it was super cool.
Absolutely fantastic. So we got to understand the 7th-generation game. So the last conversation we had, we talked about investing in your kids. And the rough part I'm having right now with both Rufus and Rhadi, because we just talked about the apps and the demographic they live in. You know, the kids now, they live in a space and place where the cell phone was, and social media and iPad, all those things were invented in their lifetime. You and I saw the development of Netscape, okay?
Yeah.
So, right. We saw the internet get developed.
Yeah.
Yes, it's something. I'm trying to get them to understand that investments are made every day, long term, and you can't. You sometimes you don't see what you lose by not investing. And as a parent, it's up to me to make you invest in the things that you like, reading and writing, reading, writing, arithmetic, 3 hours, make you invest in the things that you're going to need later on. How did you speak to your quasi-adult and now adult children about making investments, or what was your methodology in terms of investing? Not even in terms of time and money, and you talked about investing in your children and showing them what you did behaviorally, but sometimes they don't pick up on that stuff when they're kids. Let me move out of the way and let you answer the way you want to answer. You're the podcast guest.
Well, one thing I told my kids a lot is you can screw your life up in 2 ways. One is you get drunk, you run over a lady with her kid in the baby carriage and you go to jail for, DUI. You crash into a tree and you're quadriplegic. You get addicted to drugs and end up living on the street. So you can screw your life up in a dramatic way, but most people if they screw their life up, do it in a series of small steps. You don't do your math homework, and so you don't understand fractions. And so then when you get to decimals, you don't get that. And when you get to scientific notation, you don't get that. So it's those little things every day, whether it's in sports when you don't go to practice, and not going once isn't going to be a big factor, but then it starts to be a habit. Rhonda asked me once to write something on her wall of her dojo at home, and I wrote up there, winning is a habit. And that's the thing that I tell my kids is every time you decide to put out a little less effort, to not study, to not do your homework, that's a little less successful you're going to be. And maybe you can do twice as much the next day. But after a while, it adds up. It adds up for good. It adds up for bad. And that's true for your social relationships. It's true for your profession. It's true for a sport. It's true for anything. If any time you make the choice to do less than you can, you're making your life a little less than it can be.
I was listening to a podcast today when I wish I had to do his name. Because it's his podcast, I want to try to get his name and do it right. I don't want to. What is the guy's name? Cheese on bread. It was with 2-time Olympian. I think it was Jay Owens or something like that. Oh, Kevin Barnett on the Beyond Athletic podcast. And I didn't want to not quote him if I've taken exactly what he was talking about, but he was talking about the concept of, it doesn't matter if you're hurt, it doesn't matter if you're tired, it doesn't matter if you're sick, it doesn't matter if you can't give 100%. Give 100% of what you have.
Yeah.
So if you're sick and you can't make it to practice, then you FaceTime in and you have them put your shit on the stand where you can be engaged for the hour and a half of practice. And if you fall asleep, then you fall asleep. And then you hurt, you maximize what you can have. But it's for people who are that, if you are that insane about being that good, then those are the things that you do. You maximize everything that you can. I was having a conversation with my kids last week in the dojo. My son remembers when he was practicing for lacrosse, I had my second lateral collateral ligament replacement on my knee, LCL replacement on my knee. I had surgery in the morning. That afternoon, I was on the lacrosse field with Rufus. He remembers that to this day. He was like, Daddy, because he told me about last year, he said, Daddy, you had to be hurting when you came out there. I said, yes, but I wasn't hurting as bad as you would have hurt by not having your dad at practice. I said, and I had to maximize what I could do. I said, and the best I could do is what I did. And that's just the best that you do. You know, you do your best. What they say, good, better, best, never let it rest till your best becomes your what? Your best becomes your better and your better becomes your best. That's it. You want to be present, you want to be there, and you want to maximize what you have. I tell my kids, if you're hurt, come to practice, sit in a chair and observe. You're not learning. First of all, your parents are paying for class already, and you're not learning anything at home. The parents tell me all the time, well, she's hurt. She hurt her collarbone. I say, great. Have her come sit down and watch practice. It's those little errors that you make when you start cutting deals with yourself. You know, that's when you put yourself in a bad situation. You're just not making the right, I think, investment overall for your life. You know. So, Doc, what does your company currently do, and what are you hoping to do with the company in the next 5 to 7 years?
Well, one thing that we've been doing more of, and I think is about to really explode, is customized educational games. And it kind of goes back to exactly what you were talking about with the apps with your kids. There's a lot of organizations out there that want to appeal to younger people that are not being successful at it. Whether it's, say, the State Historical Society, and you have a lot of people who really love history and they're very excited about the history of Florida or whatever state it is, and yet they don't see a lot of people Rufus's age coming in there. They don't even see a lot of people, my daughter Julia, who's in her 20s, age coming in there, because it's not a thing that appeals to them. Not that history isn't interesting, but it's not in the areas they are, for example, on the App Store, right? And so we have had a number of people come to us and say, hey, could you make an app for us to teach the Lakota language? And as you know, as a marketing expert yourself, sitting there waiting for people to come and knock on your door and ask you to do it is not really a marketing strategy, because you
can't be like, we'll build it and they'll come. No, they won't.
Right. Well, but that's not our initial idea, right? Our initial idea was that we would make educational games and sell them to schools, not that we would make them for specific tribes or organizations. But it's kind of like, you probably know, Viagra was originally done some kind of heart medication, right? And they found out its impact when they couldn't get the rest of the pills back from people. So it's kind of like that we started out, making educational games, and it's great, and we do, and we sell them, and, we have a contract with USDA to actually fund schools in 6 states. So if you're in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Arizona, Oregon, or New Mexico, you can actually get our games free for your school, paid for by USDA. So, that is a big part of our business. But the thing that is really growing at an exponential rate is people, whether they're, association to support a specific commodity, or whether they're a historical association, whether they're a bank, people coming to us and saying, we'd like a game that teaches this knowledge we think is important, whether it's financial literacy or, how important the beef industry is. We'd like something teaching kids this. And so that's the area that has really been growing the last couple of years. And so we're doing a crowd equity raise. We're thinking about this. I think we're going to pull the trigger on it in the next few weeks, where people can invest in the company. Because as you know, up until fairly recently, if you were going to invest in the next Amazon or Google or Facebook, you had to be an accredited investor. You had to have, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that you made. And now there's these crowd equity platforms. So you're not like with Kickstarter buying a product, you're buying a small share of the company. And so we're going in two really interesting directions. We're going from making educational games that we sell to schools to making customized games that we sell to anybody. And we also are, in the long term, looking at selling those building blocks. So it's kind of like WordPress for educational games. So we're doing it in-house now, which lets us make games faster and cheaper, educational games specifically, than anybody else. And then as we progress, we're looking down the road 5 years from now of selling that technology so anybody can make their own educational games. There's a lot of educational games out there, but anybody who's looked at them knows that most of them are not very good games and not very good education, where ours are good games, good education, and getting better every day. So you can tell I'm very excited about the future.
Well, let me ask you a question. On the crowdfunding part, is this for people to invest in, for you all to use the money and grow the company, or just for people to invest in, for them to get a return on their investment?
Well, it's both. Like Rhonda invested very early on. We did a seed round. So in a seed round, you have to be a accredited investor, right? It can't be, you gave me $1,000, you invested $1,000, because that could have been your grocery money, right? So accredited investors understand you're taking a risk and it may pay off really big, or you may lose your money. So when she invested, the company was...
Let me say this for people who are listening. That is absolutely every investment. That's when you buy a house. That's when you buy a car. That's when you buy... It's every investment is like this.
Right. But just like a house or car, right? You have to be approved for that level of risk. So that's one of the things people are looking at is potential return on investment.
Yeah, here's what I was asking, because I know there's certain sites that I see when people just... they just put their credit card in and they just give money to the company. As a matter of fact, I just co-produced a movie that's premiering short film on the 18th of June. And the person who was the director, he did some crowdfunding for it. And it was just, people just donated to help the movie get off the feet. Do people get in touch with you to make an investment to basically own a share or a piece of the company?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So they're hoping to get a return on investment.
Okay. All right.
It's not like crowdfunding where you say, oh, this is a great thing, you should go and do it. Assuming we're successful with this company and we sell it 5 years down the road, you would get significantly more than your money back. That is why people are putting it into crowd equity as an investment.
Okay. Do they get any returns annually?
Not usually, no. Usually with a startup like ours, and we've been doing this for years, you roll the profit back into research and development. So our long range plan is to sell this company to a much larger company, to like a Google or a Pearson or a Houghton Mifflin. And that's the general path that companies like ours would take. You come out and you develop a product that one of these bigger companies doesn't have the speed to iterate to do. And then they look at it and say, hey, we would like that as part of our company. And they offer you significantly more than your investors have put in, and you make the deal and everybody gets their money. And that's how it works.
So for the people who are listening, I know Doc, and she knows me, and we know what we're talking about. And my friend who's listening understands what we're talking about. But a lot of people don't know who Pearson and Houghton Mifflin are. Okay.
Oh, Pearson is the biggest education company in the world. They're headquartered out of the United Kingdom. Houghton Mifflin is a huge textbook publisher. So who is probably going to end up buying our company would be either a company that's already in education, that's kind of traditional and doesn't have a very big entry into the educational game space,
Right.
or a company that's more of a gaming company that wants to get in education. So one of those is the largest possibility, I would say.
Okay. That's absolutely fantastic. And it allows you all to use what we would call guerrilla-like marketing and guerrilla-like R&D tactics that a bigger company can't use, just because they're just so big and so robust. They're really good at cranking out what it is that they do. They're not really good at doing new stuff. So what they do when new things come around, they just buy them.
This is true.
And they put them inside of their system, and then they keep rolling because they're really good at big business stuff. On the R&D side, it's usually small companies. Like, that's what Silicon Valley was really known for at the time, for a lot of guerrilla marketing and guerrilla R&D. And then big companies like what you said, Google and Facebook and things like that, they went and bought these other companies.
We started in markets that were too small for like the Microsofts to pay attention to, right? Like the Spirit Lake Nation's got, 7,500 tribal members. But then we went from there, to Standing Rock, to Turtle Mountain, to Upper Sioux community, to, you go to all these different places and you add up each of these small communities, and that's a significant market. And also, all of these small communities are, maybe from a profit-making perspective, they weren't worth looking at to Microsoft, but they have valuable knowledge that's really important to continue. I'm hoping that we could start doing some work in Trinidad and Tobago. So we have been very hyper-local, producing games for these very small markets. But then the other thing is, because they're fun games, it's like Juliana Taken Alive, this friend of mine from Standing Rock, always says, it's not only Lakota children that need to learn about the Lakota. It's part of your history too. If you're an American,
if you're in North America, South America, Central America, the American history is your history.
And then on top of that, there's just a lot of fascinating things. I mean, I learned all about indigenous medicinal plants. Will that actually help me be a better software developer? Probably not, but it was super interesting. And that's the other thing. Maria, our CEO, always said she played Mario Brothers and she was never a plumber in overalls. So some of these games are just interesting. It's an interesting way for kids to learn. And my brother, who's a really good math teacher, he teaches 8th grade algebra, and he says, kids ask him, when is this ever going to be of use to me? And he says, I don't know. But look at what I do. I mean, I write software for a living. I do statistical analyses, sometimes on high performance computing clusters. None of this existed when I was in high school or middle school. So I don't know how this information on medicinal plants will be useful to you. But I suppose that a lot of things attributed to Einstein are not really things he ever said. But someone supposedly said that when they were asked what good would this scientific knowledge be, they said, what good is a newborn baby? And the point is, you don't know what will be useful to you. So to me, your best tactic is to learn everything you can. I mean, that's kind of what you and I do. I mean, you didn't stick with judo, you didn't stick with football, you went into marketing, you went into kinesiology. Right. So, that's what we do, is we started out with whoever wanted to work with us, with whatever they wanted to teach. And on Spirit Lake, it was the culture and history of the Spirit Lake people. On Turtle Mountain, it was similarly the Ojibwe history and culture. With Pine Ridge and Standing Rock, it was the Lakota language. And then in Chile, it was English, because they have a saying, Inglés abre puertas, the English opens doors, which is true for a lot of Latin American communities. So whatever people want to teach, we're there to help them by developing games centered around their knowledge. And we work with the people who, whether it's the Lakota or whether it's people in Chile who are historians, from Chile, whatever it is, we'll work with people to understand their content they want to produce, and then we put it into a game that kids want to play. It's super fun.
It is, man. And the thing about it is that it never runs out, because people, everyone every species in the animal kingdom, including humans, are constantly learning.
Right.
Like if you don't learn, you die. Like
And
you have to learn, you have to adapt. That's really, really cool.
and everybody has something they want to teach. You know, like I said, if you're the historical society, if you're a museum, there's a lot of these entities that would like more young people involved. There's a lot of sports entities. I was talking to someone that works in MMA, and he said they do camps for young people. And a lot of these young people that come in the summer are at-risk youth. They're not doing great in school. And he wants us to develop a game for them where they learn about the history of each sport. And
Right.
so I think there's so much opportunity out there.
Yes, for sure. I mean, that's really, really good stuff, man. It's kind of basically what we talked about at the beginning of this conversation and yesterday about just the investment and what you said. You don't know where your career is going to end up, but if you miss that opportunity to read that book recommendation or to do the extra problems or to get on Khan Academy or iExcel or 7th Generation Games and the new app that they're developing, if you miss the opportunity to do the extra, what we call extra study, then it's impossible for you to live a life that's extraordinary if you don't do the extra.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely impossible. So here's what I need to know, Doc, because I know I got to get ready to go and you got to get ready to go because I got more stuff to do today. But I need to know this in terms of investment. Let's take the last 5 minutes here. How do people get in on this? Because I mean, I heard what you said. I heard what you said personally. You said the growth is exponential on this part where people want apps developed for this particular area of service that you guys provide.
Right.
How do people who are listening, how do they do what Rhonda did? How do they invest and possibly triple their money?
I have a really cool thing for you. So, assuming, which I think we will, I'm pretty 99% certain we go with these crowdfunding people. They're called WeFunder. There's a whole long story about it that I can maybe send you an email on. But anyway, 30% we're raising $500,000 through this. We have another $500,000 that we're raising with venture capital funds, but $500,000 is being raised through the WeFunder. The first 30% can be an early round. What that means is, so when we did the seed round the first time and Rhonda invested, you probably know this, but I did not. You can't give special terms to special people because I said, oh, we'll give Rhonda a better valuation than other people. And the lawyers came in. We do have lawyers that keep us out of white collar prison. They said, no, you can't do that. Everybody has to have the same terms. But what you can do is you can open up a note and close it in a week or less. Be like, oh, here's our note. If you sign on it today, this is what it is. And after that, the valuation goes up to $4 million. So we did that. And we were part of an accelerator, a business accelerator. Two of the investors there are like, oh, I want in on that. Here's my check. So they got on the same note that Rhonda did, and then it closed a week later. Well, with the WeFunder, you can do that. So the first 30% can be sort of friends and family round. And we're doing this with Wharton Business School. There's a long story behind that. But anyway, so Wharton is sending out to all their alumni. And so the first 150,000 is going to be at, I think, a $7 million valuation. Then it jumps up to $8 million. So I can give you the link when it goes live. And anybody who gets in on that first 30% will pretty much guaranteed to increase their investment by, 15% or whatever, because after the first 30%, the value jumps up. So
what I'm going to do is, when will you be able to give me that link? Not now, not later, when?
Within 3 weeks.
Okay, within 3 weeks. All right.
They told us they're ready to pull the plug tomorrow, but we wanted to discuss things with people like you, get everything lined up, get our, marketing campaign and everything ready to go.
So here's what's going to happen, Doc. All right. I'm going to have to bring you on again the day before or the day of that the day before. Give me 2 days. 2 days before we get that link so that we can send this out to the people so that they have an opportunity. Listen, everybody, I did a lot of work in my life, just like you've done a lot of work. It's my friend and I were just talking about this. Most of the time, when you get your first hit of something, like usually a financial hit, it has absolutely zero to do with what you've been doing or what you do for it. It has to do with, because you've done a certain amount of work, it's put you in this position or this space or this station or this class of people that now they're willing to share this information with you here. So people come from UFC, you can come from professional football, you can be a PhD in something, you could be a plumber and work and do the hourly labor and make a certain amount of money, but everybody can get up here and now they can all meet because now we're having the same conversation. I tell people at the top don't care if you're white, black, Hispanic, woman, they have conversations about green. And that
yeah.
and that's listen, and if you've been in those type of rooms, you can see that. The beautiful thing about this as we close is you're actually giving people an opportunity to, peek in the room, because most of the time you don't get an opportunity to get in on these type of investments. You just don't. You just don't know. You don't hear and you don't know. And people roll the dice. They go to Vegas and they spend, $500 on a crap table and walk out of there and they feel good because they gambled.
I wanted to do the crowd equity thing because, I see exactly what you said. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger, nice man. He has an office a few blocks from here, right? I see him out riding his bicycle. He has invested in, I think, 300 startups. So he has millions of dollars. So he puts $1 million in and he makes another $2 million on top of it. And people like him can do that because they're accredited investors and they can get in on these deals. But the guy who has $500 that he might spend at the crap table in Vegas, this is one hell of a lot better odds of making money. But with a credit investor, like you have to make X amount of dollars, you can't do that. But with the crowd equity, it allows the guy who has 500 to invest to put it in something that might really pay off.
Let me tell you something. For people who are listening as we close, we're just talking to be talking, Doc and I. But you're talking to people or you're listening to people right now who have written checks and wired money that it'll make your heart stop for a moment when you Doc is nodding her head right now. It makes your heart stop for a moment when you wire it, but that's the only way in. It's like in judo. If you don't throw, they're not falling down.
I will tell you, I will probably always remember a couple things I will always remember. Winning the World Championships, when we got our first $1 million contract. I mean, I got the call and I honestly you'd have to be cool and that's really great, and then you hang up and pull to the side of the road and go, right? Maybe that's just me. You're on mute. I can't hear you.
I'm sure anybody would do that if they had $1 million contract.
Pardon?
Hear me now?
Yeah.
I said, I'm sure anybody would do that if they had $1 million contract.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, Doc. We got to come on again.
Okay.
We got to come on again and we got to talk about what the hell did we talk about the next time? What do we talk about next
time? We're shooting for doing a release around early June, but it might be sooner. So like I said, the WeFinder people said they're ready to go right now. I don't think that's the way you do things. So
we'll talk about releases because my movie comes out on the 18th of June, but it's going to be a local release at first. And I'll give everybody the name of it and all that stuff. It's been on, it's called Paperline, and it's been on Instagram and all the marketing going on. But we'll talk about releases. That way I can talk about my movie coming out,
Okay,
and about the crowd equity funding coming out for your business. And
so I would say between 4 to 6 weeks it will start. We're aiming for 3 weeks from now to start, but you know how it is. You're organized. You're a marketing guy. You don't just say, oh, today everybody, check out our crowd equity raise. So we're putting all our ducks in a row. We want, if anybody comes and asks us, is this a guaranteed return? No. What is your anticipated return? About 50%, that we have all of the answers.
Then you got 12 to 15 days for the lawyers to mull over everything that's written down.
Yes.
It's a big, because nobody wants to go to jail.
That's right. Whenever somebody comes, they complain about our accountant said this and won't let us do it, or that, the attorney said this and won't let us do it. I'm like, then we're not doing it, because those people keep me out of white collar prison. And so far, they've done a really good job. So we listen to what they say.
I'm trying to tell you. Well, Doc, always an absolute pleasure. Where can people find you online in terms of your website? And where can they find you in terms of 7 Generation Games on the social media, Instagram or YouTube, etc.?
7 Generation Games is 7, the number 7, generationgames.com. And they can find me, Dr. Dr. Anne Maria, on Twitter, and Anne Maria 7, it's the number 7 Gen, on Instagram. A smarter person would use the same username across all platforms, but I did not. So there you go.
I didn't either, Doc. Well, Doc, thank you so much. And as I always say, man, God loves you. I mean, I love you, but God loves you best. And that's it.
That's really good.
All right.
Let me know when you're ready to release this, okay?
Yes, I will do it.
Awesome. And yeah, we'll